Welcome back to the Economist Virtual Sustainability Week. We're here for an interview with Ezgi Barcenas, Global Vice President for Sustainability at AB InBev. Ezgi, let's get right into it. Could you give us a sense of how far ABI has got towards its sustainability goals, and obviously what those goals are?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jan. Thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. So as the leading global brewer, with operations across over 50 markets around the world, at AB InBev, we are deeply connected to the communities where we live and work, and we rely on that healthy environment and the thriving communities. And over 90% of our products we source, make and sell locally. So for us, again, that deep connection is incredibly important. So when we think about sustainability and the set of commitments that we put out there in 2018, we announced what I would call our most ambitious set of commitments yet around sustainability that really allowed us to drive that progress and that impact across our entire value chain, whether it's farmers on one end upstream, all the way downstream to post-consumer packaging and how we interact with our recycling supply chain. So the big commitments are around smart agriculture, water stewardship, circular packaging, and climate action. And if I can give a few examples, in smart agriculture, we're working to ensure that over 20,000 of our farmers, our direct farmers around the world, are skilled, connected, and financially empowered. And we're really making good progress there in terms of providing them with the right tools and resources, connecting them to better data, and also ensuring that they have access to financial tools that they didn't before. If you look at our water commitment, we are right now at 2.7 hectoliter per hectoliter of beer, which makes us the leading brewer around the world in terms of water efficiency. But we didn't want to just focus on our operational efficiency. So now we're also looking at, how do we make sure that 100% of our communities around the world in high stress areas are actually the ones that we're going to make sure that we provide that measurable improvement in watershed health and water availability and quality.
Can I stop you there for a moment? Can I butt in for a moment? I'm very interested. So it seems 2.7 liters of water per liter of beer doesn't seem like a lot, actually. It seems to be awfully efficient. How much better can you get, do you think? I mean, what's the dream? I mean, presumably it's impossible to do one for one. But how close to one for one could you, in principle, get?
Yeah, it's a great question. Over the last decade, we improved our water efficiency by over 35%, right? So, where we started was over 4 hectoliter per hectoliter, and we've all been learning from each other from within the beverage industry as well. We're, engaging in industry associations where we're driving some of these changes and looking for technologies. But yes, our ambition for 2025 is to get down to 2.5 hectoliter per hectoliter. And we have an even more ambitious target in the high stress areas around the world. So we really want to make sure that we're taking a very targeted approach to where and how we dedicate resources so that, we can make sure that that water availability quality is something that we can continue to measurably improve. But, one example I can give in terms of, 1-to-1 hectoliter or a water positive feature, last year in March, we announced with the UN Global Compact a water resilience coalition, the UN Global Compact CO Water Mandate partners, as well as other cross-sector, companies that came together, and we announced this initiative around water resilience. And we're really challenging each other to really think about, what are the frameworks? How are we driving the debate? What are our findings? How do we really look forward to a water positive future? So these are some of the conversations that we're engaged in, that we're leading the debate on together with our partners. But yes, Jan, in the spirit of continuous improvement, I think there's always room, especially as the technologies advance.
So on target, so how do you decide what target to set so that it's sort of attainable, but not so ambitious that there is no chance of meeting it? So how do you go about that? Making a genuine material commitment that you can actually meet.
Yeah, it's a great question. So our starting point is always our materiality assessment, and we launched our ESG report a few weeks ago at the end of February, and you can see our full materiality assessment in there as well. We carry out that analysis every few years, where we engage with internal and external stakeholders to really help us identify what are the environmental, social, economic issues that are relevant for our business success, but also relevant for our stakeholders. Be it our communities, our customers, our retailer partners, our NGO partners, our investors, and really bringing that point of view and mapping it out to say, here are the priorities that we need to invest in. So it is very clear where we should really focus our efforts on, and then that's where we start. And I would say, at ABI, there's no easy target either. So it's the difficult conversation, or I think the difficulty you see in many companies, is how do you create alignment? I think generally people agree on what needs to be done. What is really difficult is how do you create that alignment across functions and across zones so that everyone can drive towards that shared mission. And that's something that we've done from the beginning at AB InBev, where in 2017 we brought together over 70 of our colleagues from around the world to help us co-design what these public commitments are around packaging, climate, agriculture, and water. So once the commitments are set and designed by a cross-functional team, then it is easy to carry those out and even link them to your compensation through the targets that we share for our bonus.
So, so this provides a sort of an interesting illustration of just how tricky it is. I mean, obviously, if executives' compensation depend on it, it is in their interest to make sure that these targets are as easy to reach as possible. So how do you avoid that sort of trying to game the system?
Yeah, it's the targets are not easy by any means, and I think when we set the commitments, we created roadmaps to how we think we're going to get to we're going to achieve 100% of these commitments by 2025. But at the time, we also knew that these were stretch goals, and we didn't really have clear pathways to get to 100%. Which is why actually we launched our 100 Plus Sustainability Accelerator program in 2018, a few months after we announced the goals, because we knew that based on the current partnerships and technologies, we did not have all the answers. But we still set those stretch commitments and stretch targets for the business. And now we're in search of, those innovations and the entrepreneurs around the world that can help us, solve or address some of the shared challenges, be it environmental or social.
So on materiality, let's go back to that for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you decide, how do you think about what is material for ABI? So obviously there are lots of various ways in which companies can improve their record on sustainability. I mean, there are 165 sort of sustainable development targets or targets within the sustainable development goals.
Within the goals.
So, you can sort of, to be a cynic, I mean, you could go around and pick and choose the ones where the company is going to make progress anyway, and say, pick these are the ones that we're going to make progress on, and then invariably make progress on them. So how do you decide? How do you think about ensuring that that the goals you set yourself are in the right areas, in the areas where you can actually make an impact?
Yeah, great question. And, we have a very strong community of partners, and, whether they're kind of strategic advisors or implementation partners and NGOs. So when we announced our public commitments, we actually ran them by about a dozen NGOs to get their feedback. And they continue to help us refine what that commitment could be like and how we approach it. But, of course, our goals are informed by the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and we want to help contribute to the delivery of those goals at the local level. And this is what our local teams are really carrying out around the world in partnership with the governments and with their industry partners as well on the ground. But yes, I think ultimately, if everyone really looked into, okay, what is my greatest impact in the world? Where does my risk come from? And where can I really create and share that value? Then, we could all do our part and be part of the solution and help contribute. But yes, absolutely. We firmly believe that sustainability ultimately needs to make business sense. It needs to be closely linked and integrated into your supply chain. It needs to be about supply security. It needs to be about, how do you follow the evolving consumer trends, how we think about innovation, but also how we provide a sense of purpose to our colleagues around the world as well. So if all of these things, in our initiatives, if it makes sense for us, it will ultimately help contribute to the UN Sustainable Development Goals as well.
How do you choose your strategic partners and the NGOs with whom you solicit opinions?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've had long-standing partnerships and relationships with many of them, and some of them were meeting them for the first time and fostering a new relationship and building that rapport as well. Again, this really comes back to our sense of ownership and the heightened sense of accountability. We want to hold ourselves accountable. We want to hold our partners accountable in how we deliver some of these commitments. So, there are global partners, but then will be regional or local partners as well, depending on the expertise needed, the implementation partners needed, the boots on the ground versus the strategic advisors. So, there is an abundance of partners, and we're really looking to leverage their learnings. I mean, one example I can give is how we partner with the Nature Conservancy for years on water, and now we're partnering with them in agriculture on soil health as well. So last year, we signed a multi-year contract with them to look into soil health and really build a framework for a variety of crops and a variety of regions around the world, and how we think about soil health, how that helps contribute to to biodiversity, to the health of watersheds, to ensuring that we're creating that climate resilience within our supply chain as well. So, always looking for new partners, but also looking for new ways to partner with existing partners as well.
On the feedback, when you send them your goals or what you want to achieve and the ways to achieve those goals, did you get a lot of criticism back, or were they mostly happy with your suggestions? So how much of a sort of joint, collaborative back and forth was it, as opposed to just them, putting a seal of approval on what you put before them?
Yeah, some of them were partners that knew our work from before, so they could see how we were building on that legacy, on that prior success or prior learnings, and others were new to us. So in the process, we brought them together a few times, some in person, some one-on-one, some group sessions, where they really provided feedback and kind of threw wrenches into kind of our thinking, our analytics, but also the language. So like if you look at the goal language and how we craft them and the KPIs that sit within them, the definitions of what it means to be skilled or connected or financially empowered, all these things we really ran through our partners that are experts in their field, so that they can again hold us accountable.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, I think. I mean, it's on the one hand, NGOs make a point of being very critical of the corporate sector, and on the other, they are increasingly an indispensable collaborator for a lot of companies, especially those which try to take sustainability seriously. I have a sort of broader question. Obviously, with water, for instance, you've made significant progress, and in other areas, as you mentioned, you've also made progress. How much sort of low-hanging fruit do you think there is left for ABI, and when will it start getting considerably harder to make incremental improvements?
Yeah, I mean, I can give examples from within ABI, but I think we're seeing this around the world in other companies as well, where if you look at, our first set of commitments were the environmental goals. They were actually truly just environmental goals that we announced in 2009. We delivered them by 2012, and then we had another second set of environmental goals that were due by 2017. And the evolution that you see there is, in 2009, we started with our operational efficiency and what was within our control and within our four walls. In the next set of commitments, you saw that slowly we started expanding out, started thinking about, how do we protect watersheds? How do we continue to push out eco-coolers into our value chain? So the thinking evolved. And if you look at this set of commitments, again, there is very much a great learning into, how do we bring that outward in approach in how we think about how we show up in the world and how we are a partner of the communities and the supply chain partners, and how we want to create that long-term resilience. So again, giving that water example, right? We moved from a water efficiency target to a protecting a watershed target to now saying, 100% of our communities will have measurably improved water availability and quality. So really looking at context-based metrics to improve that watershed health. So, increasingly, you're not only broadening the scope, but also broadening that accountability, because we're learning, the science is evolving, our partners are also learning with us along the way. So that's just one example. And I would say, I think we're a long way away from low-hanging fruit. If I look at kind of the broader spectrum of the food and beverage industry, but food and beverage industry is actually one that is closely linked to agriculture and water, and we've made a lot of great progress there. I think the opportunity now for us is how do we continue to decarbonize? How do we continue to really make that transition into a low carbon economy? As businesses around the world and as governments as well.
So what I'm trying to get at is this tension. Like in many cases, pursuing efficiency or more efficient use of resources is something which makes pure financial sense as well as environmental sense for companies. That obviously often requires some amount of investment in order to be able to reap those efficiencies. But that investment often pays back pretty quickly. So what I'm trying to get at is, how much scope do you think there is left for these sort of relatively straightforward, narrow shareholder value generating efficiency gains? And when will, you come up against some trade-offs where you actually either need to think about a much longer term investment that might pay back in 10, 20, 30 years, or might not, but is good in the short and long term for the environment. And how do you decide when to pursue such investments?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pandemic, over the last year has been a great dress rehearsal for sustainable development, right? And how we think about how we design supply chains, value chains, the product offerings, how close we are to our communities and consumers. So if you think about it, for years we could argue that we've designed for efficiency, right? And by we I mean companies in general, governments, the institutions. But there's also something to be said about how do you design for resilience and make sure that you're prepared for the future, you're future-proofing your business, your value chain, you're really creating that inclusive, sustainable, financially sound supply chain for yourself and for your communities as well. So I think the more we go into the long-term thinking on resilience, and I think this is where the debates are evolving in climate change as well, the more you're going to see that these things, there's still a lot of value to be made and they still make economic sense. I mean, one example is renewable electricity. We have a commitment, to go 100% renewable by 2025. Over 70% of our contract is already, of our volume is already contracted. So, we're reporting on our contracted volume because these things take time for them to become operational. We're signing power purchase agreements that are 10, 15-year long, that are, enabling our suppliers to put in place a wind farm or a solar farm that we can offtake that clean electricity from. And you see that the cost of wind has gone down and now the cost of solar is going down, right? So if you think about green electricity, if you have the enabling policies and the regulatory backbones, you will see that you can create a competitive marketplace for it. So we're seeing that in different markets around the world now where we're sourcing renewable electricity, and we want to bring those learnings into other markets. So I think this is not a one-size-fits-all approach, but at the same time, you can take a lot of the learnings from one market to another as the technology improves and the policies evolve. So that's just one example, but similarly, if you think about recycled content back in our packaging, or if you think about our returnable packaging, which is our two-way bottles that exist in many markets around the world, or our keg system, all those things make financial sense. They make economic sense. Again, similarly with agriculture, if you create resilient supply chains, a clear source of high quality crop for our business while our farmers are thriving, that makes business sense. I would argue that probably water and investing in long-term restoration conservation efforts in watersheds is the one where you don't immediately see that return on investment, or you don't immediately see, okay, how am I creating value here? But again, if you orient yourself around, okay, this is about resilience, this is about our communities and our business and our license to operate and license to grow, it makes sense, right? So ultimately, I think these are things that businesses are continuing to evolve their thinking on. But yeah, sustainability makes business sense.
Well, I don't think we could sum up the debate any more succinctly, and unfortunately we're run out of time. So we'll have to sum it up with that wonderful conclusion, which is extremely positive, and hopefully we can reconvene in a couple of years to see how much progress you're making towards those goals.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you so much, Ezgi.